don't get stuck and don't hesitate just because you might not have the perfect answer when someone says, "Well, what's your purpose in doing all of this?" Or what's your mission? What's your intention? I think that there is something to be said for really thinking through some things and getting clear on, why it is that you're doing what you're doing. But I'm a big believer in just do it, get started.
Welcome to the Great Life Experiment podcast. I'm your host, Monique Schaefer, and together we'll grapple with our messy, beautiful, and ever-changing personal and professional lives and the business world around us. I deeply believe there is no one right way to do this thing called life. Let's experiment together. As a quick reminder, friends, please note that this podcast is an independent production and the information presented here and views expressed here reflect my personal opinion and do not reflect the views or positions of any organization or company that I'm affiliated with. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome, friends, to this week's episode of the Great Life Experiment podcast. I am your host, Monique Schaefer, and I'm so excited for our guest today, Mary Robb. She is the founder and CEO of Social Practice, which is a boutique social media agency, and she specializes in contact market, aesthetic practices, and small businesses. And so you might be wondering, Monique, you work in tech. Why are you interviewing somebody that is with the aesthetic practices? So think dentistry, think plastic surgery, think dermatology, think med spas. Like, why is that a good fit here? And the thing that I've learned in life is some of my best inspiration actually comes from people in industries that have nothing to do with what I actually do. And it helps me get to the principle and the main idea, and then I can take it and apply it to my industry. So I'm so excited because she was the founder. She is an entrepreneur. She has a background in public relations, marketing, business development. And I love how passionate she is about working with ambitious leaders, other entrepreneurs. If you are not an entrepreneur and listening, you are still an entrepreneur. And so this is relevant for you. But she's really passionate about helping people confidently step into and harness their power of storytelling and who they are. And even if they represent a business, their own personal brand. And she is very much about authentic connection. I will make sure her socials are down below for you to follow her, but you will see that she is really about authentic connection, helping people grow in their influence, and making sure that your brand is aligned with your purpose and your vision. And as many good leaders, I love that she has stepped into being a mentor and helping to develop the next generation of social media talent out there. And we both have a love of traveling, staying active, being with friends and family. And we have mutual friends through Fortify. I will give the brand agency a shout out as well. So welcome, Mary.
Woo! I was about to jump out of my chair. That was so good. I felt like I was at church or something. You nailed it. Come and introduce me in any podcast I do from here on out. That was perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
Oh, you are most welcome. And thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to jump into this. Many of my listeners and people that I work with, when I told them that I was starting a podcast, showing up more on Instagram, did Instagram first because that felt safer. And then I edged in to LinkedIn where all my professional network was. They're like, wow, you're showing up more on social media.
I love
The
it.
main thing people said was, I hate social media. Like,
Uh-huh.
I am terrified to show up on social media.
Yep.
How are you doing that? I think a lot of people listening are very consumers of social media, even if it's just quietly, whether it's their jujitsu videos or cute baby animal videos or whatever it is. But there's a real fear of, or a belief of like, I'm not a content creator. I don't
Mhm.
have anything to share, or I'm private. I'm really nervous
Yeah.
about showing up. I know you work with a lot of small businesses, but because they're small businesses, they very much have leaders Mhm. Who are so tightly associated with the business and in the brand. For somebody listening today and they're in the professional space or they have their own small business, let's start with the difference between a business brand and a personal brand. And maybe we can talk through some of the mindset things that I just tapped into.
Yeah, I love this topic because it is so relevant, and anyone who is building something, this is going to be something that they're going to have to figure out and really map out for themselves. It is confusing because there is overlap between your business and your personal brand. So I like to start with the business brand. I typically find that that's easier for people to lean into. The first thing you want to think about with your business brand is that as the owner, you want to be careful about not making yourself the center of the business brand. Because if you think about business strategy, if you want to scale, a smart business owner knows that you need to build a business where if you were to exit tomorrow, it would still operate really well and people would still come to the business. You would still have customers, you would have the same culture. So, on the business side of things, it's important to get really clear on the business's mission, vision, values, culture, and you're showcasing your team, you're showcasing your product or your service, you're showcasing client patient testimonials, you're highlighting the overall experience of what it's like to either work inside of or be a customer of your business. You can still be a part of that content and you really should be, depending on how small you are, but that's more so about the business as a whole. And there's multiple people involved in that. Then we have your personal brand. This is where things get a little bit interesting because it does require some vulnerability. It requires just self confidence. It also requires discovery and clarity. A lot of times when we're building a business, we're so focused on everybody else that we forget about ourselves. And I have this conversation all the time with business owners of, well, I'm okay with shining a light on my company, but for me personally, I'm a little bit more hesitant. And the reality is, a lot of times your values, your mission at your business is very similar to you as a person. But whenever the season comes or it's time for you to start using your personal brand as a way to tell your story and to have a bigger impact on more people, it's a really good idea to sit down and really brainstorm on a few key things. I know what's really helped me and several of the clients that I've worked with is the first place to start would be to really get clear on your personal core values. And I'll just share mine just for some context, and everyone's are going to look different. But I have personal core values that I actually worked with my executive coach on almost 5 years ago. Her name's Ashton, by the way, and I love her to death. But essentially, my personal core values are faith, ambition, health and wellness, fun and adventure, and a growth mindset. When I'm putting together my content for my personal brand, I think about how are the things that I'm sharing aligned with one or multiple of my core values. And you can also use core values to help you create content pillars. But that's the first place to start is get clear on your values and then get clear on your why. Why am I showing up? Who really needs my message? Who needs my story? What impact am I being called to make? You get to a season in business where you realize, you've done a really good job of building a foundation in your professional career or in your business. But then you might feel like, oh, I've got all of these stories, I've got all of these experiences. I have so many things that I can share to help other people. And you have that inner calling, so not ignoring that, but leaning into it and just really, really thinking about and brainstorming on, meditating on, praying over, what is my message and what is my why? And how can I lean into my experiences as a
Mhm.
way to serve others? For me, I believe showing up and sharing is how you can love on other people
Yeah.
because you don't know how many people are walking through such similar things that you have that need to hear from someone and feel that connection. And that is one of the positives of social media is it's a place to have community and connection. And we didn't have that before 20 years ago. We had to pick up the
Mhm.
phone or we had to meet in person. And now it's like by picking up my iPhone, I can, might be in like a low spot. I can pick it up, go to one of my favorite accounts and connect. So there's a big gift in that. So
Yeah. What's interesting is I'm hearing you talk about, the business and the personal. I have my own business now, but when I started this, and I still am a big part of a large publicly traded company, which has its own brand. And I've been in this space for 12 years. And I felt this tension of when I show up on social media, particularly LinkedIn. Instagram always felt personal, but on LinkedIn, it was this, am I representing Monique as a senior leader in the tech company and the product that I represent and my customers that I represent, and feeling like I always needed to show up from a thought leadership standpoint. And when I did a similar exercise of who am I beyond my label of the company that I work for, there was obviously a lot of overlap. Like I've worked there and in this space for so long because our values did align
Mhm.
with our customers, with an integrity, with innovation, with values, right? There was a lot of overlap that it was helpful to see that I was aligned, but it was also confusing of, okay, now where do we differ and how do I show up with different values? So for me, they're not necessarily values, but kind of my brand that took me a lot of journaling, a lot of back and forth with Gemini, Chat GPT, talking to people, cutting it out, throwing something out, like messy process for months. For me, it's heart. And I didn't actually come up with that word. That was something that people said to me of make sure you have so much warmth and heart that
Yeah.
that shows up in everything that you do. And that makes you different as a leader
So
and
good.
that amplifying people. I'm all about how do you amplify
Ah,
people
yeah,
transformation. I am not your status quo leader. Like I am best if you give me chaos, I organize it, get people, and we go to the next thing.
yeah,
Leading from a place of vision, not necessarily like in the weeds. I can do
yeah,
the weeds, but I lead from vision
yeah,
and that it always had to come back to impact. That
yeah,
if I wasn't doing something that wasn't impacting the world and people
yeah,
in a positive way, like that was misaligned.
yeah,
It took me a while because I almost didn't think of many of those things because they were just who I was. I needed other people to
mhm,
help bring that out because I had a lot of pressure. Like when you say like, what is your why and what is your purpose? I felt so much pressure
mhm,
to figure out the purpose,
yeah,
the why, and then I would end up actually getting more confused. And then I'd like go consume content and then I'd be even more confused. So
yeah,
it was this interesting, you touched on it, an interesting dynamic for me of I needed lots of space and reflection to turn inward. I need to bounce off of other people. Then I'd have to come back and
yeah,
give myself the permission that this was not going to be perfect. Like I've
yeah,
said in other episodes, the whole reason I called this the great life experiment is we
mhm,
all want a great life
mhm,
and it's all an experiment. I had to give myself that permission because I had so much pressure. I have to get this right, especially if I'm putting it out there into
yeah,
the world. I felt
yeah.
like it had to be perfect before I put it out there. So I needed to get over that first hurdle of showing up before it felt polished.
That is so good, and I love this conversation because I see this being one of the biggest hurdles for people getting started, and so
Mhm.
part of my story, I grew up singing. So I sang for about 10 years. And what I learned in that experience is if you have any favorite artists that you followed over 10, 20 years, you've seen them release album after album after album. And typically, each album is completely different from the one prior. It's a whole new story. It's a whole new energy. It's a whole new genre sometimes. And the creative process can be really hard for people who aren't comfortable in it. But the reality is, when you're creating, when you're sharing, when you're in a vulnerable space, logically, it's never going to fully make sense. And it's almost like you have to give yourself permission to just live in the mess a little bit. And I am such a huge believer. I have such a simple message around consistency. It's more so about just showing up every day or however as often as you can and just doing your best. And sometimes you might not have clarity on your purpose right out of the gate. I just read a social media post about this yesterday. It was really funny because I'm finally at a season in my life where I'm pretty clear on my purpose, which I feel so blessed to be able to say that. But there was absolutely a season of my life until I was about 29 that I didn't fully understand, like, what am I supposed to be doing? And our purpose evolves and changes as our life goes on. Like right now, I don't have a husband or kids. So my purpose is to serve in my business. My purpose is to show up on social media and share my story and serve the people that follow me online. As I get older and as I evolve into different seasons of life, that's going to shift and my purpose is going to be a mom, all the things. But I think that what we need to be careful about is don't get stuck and don't hesitate just because you might not have the perfect answer when someone says, "Well, what's your purpose in doing all of this?" or "What's your mission? What's your intention?" I think that there is something to be said for really thinking through some things and getting clear on, why it is that you're doing what you're doing. But I'm a big believer in just do it, get started. Just start one day at a time.
Yeah. With getting started, for me, as I mentioned, I had very different followers between Instagram and LinkedIn. And let's even just talk about like the word follower. Like
Uh-huh.
it was people from the gym, friends, family, private account on Instagram. It took me probably a month or 2 months to even work up the courage to go public
Yeah.
with mine, but that was what I used as a sandbox. So I created that as a safe space because they're like, I love you no
Yeah.
matter what. And I started in the spaces where I felt comfortable
Yep.
and then played with that. I didn't need to do the big scary right away. And then started, what if I talk about this? Or what if I branch out here or share this piece? I'm very protective of my marriage,
Yeah.
but that is one of the most amplifying parts of my life.
Mm.
And
Good.
so it wouldn't be authentic to talk about my personal life or even my professional life because he is my sounding board on so many things if
Yeah.
I didn't bring him into it. But that was not where I wanted to go first. And I'm still allowed to have boundaries. I didn't put anything on there of parenting relationship advice. I might touch on it, but I'm not telling you how to do it because I don't want to jump into that end of social media. And
Yeah.
same thing, I think, right now for a lot of people with politics or their faith or what is it? Sex, religion, politics, all the things that can be hot button issues that maybe that's not the safest place to start
Yeah.
if you ever want to talk about those things. But
Yeah.
you are in a season, what your purpose is going to change and what you want to reveal about yourself might also change. It's not like you have to show up completely showing everything. You can have boundaries. So maybe can you talk about maybe the boundaries around social media? Because I jotted down your name like, "Oh, we definitely need to do a podcast." When we were at a retreat together, and you are an owner of a social media agency talking about your concern for mental health related to social media. So can you talk about boundaries and also mental health around social media?
Absolutely. I think when you say boundaries, I think it's really important to know yourself and know what your triggers are and know what your capacity is for absorbing information. And just like back in the day, TV commercials, pop culture, all of those things, movies, TV shows, media is still, that's how it was back in the day. And now it's social media. It influences our perspective, our mental health, how our mood. You can instantly make yourself sad and cry by listening to a sad song or watching a sad movie. So, the awareness factor is what's so tricky with social media because we're all so comfortable using our phones and we are all so emotionally attached to our phones that I think we're about to start a whole new generation of children. And I think it's gonna be really important that I'm not a mom yet, but as parents, we have very open conversations with our kids growing as they're growing up around having good boundaries with the phone and the social media and talking openly about, what if you see a friend on social media get invited to a party that you weren't invited to? And this reminds me of, if you haven't read the book The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins yet, she actually has a chapter about this. And I found a lot of healing listening to it because I thought, oh, I'm 33. And I thought, well, my generation struggles with this more than other generations. And I think Mel's in her 50s. And she had a whole story about how her best friends that lived in her neighborhood, their kids all grew up together, went to a trip to Cabo without her, and how that just hurt her so deeply. And I thought about it and I was like, my goodness, like, I can totally relate to that. There's been so many things like that that have happened on social media on a consistent basis. And you think about, we are connected to so many people and we are seeing so many things at such a high volume that we really do need to start being mindful of, how are we going to protect ourselves from the downfall of social media. And it's a slippery slope. And what I like about Mel Robbins' let them theory is it's the idea of allowing people to live their lives and being emotionally stable enough to be able to see that without taking things personally. And social media makes that more difficult, but having that awareness really helps. But I also think something as simple as, there's a setting within Instagram or within these apps where it'll send you a notification, hey, you've spent 1 hour on this app, it's time to log off. Of course, you can bypass the notification, but it sounds like such a simple, small thing. And I kind of roll my eyes because, like, I have that set up. And do I always use it as it's supposed to be used? No, but it's there so that I can think about it. And when I find myself in some sort of mood, I instantly think about, well, what have I been looking at on social media today? Have I been going out of my way to hurt my own feelings today by looking at things that I shouldn't look at? I mean, that's a real conversation that a lot of people aren't willing to go into. But when you think about, you can see who's viewing your story. Like, that's a pretty invasive thing. And depending on your lifestyle, what's going on in your world, like, that can be very triggering really quick. And you think about, again, the number of people that you follow, the volume of content that you're consuming on a social media app. I mean, there's a lot. So I actually am about to start sharing more on this, but how to not hurt your own feelings on social media is a huge passion of mine, because I have been so guilty of it, and I'm working on finding just different ways to hold myself accountable there and really set a standard for myself. I have to protect my mental health, but I know a lot of people can relate to that. Is we kind of are subconsciously, it's not even intentional, like, putting ourselves in these situations where we're putting our mind into not a non-positive headspace, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I have, oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts on that. Yes, using the timer on
Mhm.
your phone though, right? Those well-being timers. One of the things for me personally that I had to think about was being intentional when I log on to Instagram or to LinkedIn. Those are the two platforms that I post on.
Yeah.
First, I needed to decide which platforms was I even going to be on. I'm
Yeah.
not going on TikTok. That does not align with what I'm trying to create, the forum, who I'm trying to speak to. Maybe my Instagram will post to Facebook, but I'm not active on Facebook. But when I log on, asking myself, am I creating or consuming?
Yeah.
So then I'm very clear about why am I showing up and had a time box
Yeah.
that, because I was finding I was on the screen so much longer and I was mixing the two. And it's like, no, this is work time
Yeah.
for me. And I had heard from Marie Forleo, and probably other people had said it, but create before you consume.
Yes.
So
So
I very much try to be a content creator earlier in the morning before I consume. But then at the end of the night, anytime I blow past like my 10 o'clock bedtime, it's
uh-huh.
because I'm in creative flow and I'm probably in Canva and I'm like creating posts to tee up the
Uh-huh.
next day. So I know the bookends of the day are when I have my most creative flow. So
Yeah.
try to be creator there rather than consumer. Some of the boundaries that I needed to create, besides the who I talk about, there is real online safety of, not necessarily sharing like where I am right when I'm there, my kids. I
Yeah.
don't share their faces, and that's okay. Like, they are part of my story, but not everybody needs to see their sweet faces. Like, that can be for me. When it came to vulnerability, I'd hear people say some of the best personal brands, even if you're talking about your business, are being authentic and vulnerable. And I'm like, what does vulnerability mean? We have Brene Brown and we have all these great thought leaders in how to show up in vulnerability, and vulnerability not meaning that you have to share every part of you or have a therapy session
Yeah.
online. And recently, Ben and I did an episode together, and we were having an after hours conversation where he had a situation at work that came up. And he was the one, he's like, I think we need to record this because everybody deals with this. And we were literally sitting in bed with mics clipped on
I
our
love it.
PJs, and we sound raspy and all of that, but having a real conversation of how would you think about this? It was, when there was too much on his plate and it was coming from a senior leader, how do you push back?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And that felt to me like we were having a business podcast episode and a professional one. And the amount of feedback that I got was how vulnerable that actually was to share something that we are struggling with or a challenge at work.
Yeah,
And it was a very like intimate setting. And so I thought that that was interesting that I didn't need to spill the beans on something super personal. We were literally talking about business, but that can still feel intimate and vulnerable because it's something that you are struggling
yeah,
with as well.
yeah. That's so good. That's so good, and it's everybody is gonna you're gonna have your own level of comfort with it. I find that the more often that you do it, the easier it gets. And I also think you are so mindful and intentional with your audience, and you know that the people that follow you right now are in that position and are in that corporate environment. And I think it's very kind and generous and giving of you and your husband to pour into your audience in that way. I mean,
Mm,
you're serving people by sharing and by showing up authentically. And that is such a gift and a blessing for so many people. And that's a prime example of what it looks like to actually show up. But I know it's easier said than done, but that's where you're going to connect with people the most. And that's really what social media, at least in my mind, and what I will choose to believe for the rest of my life, is the intention of it is to have the ability to connect with others. And that's my
mhm.
intention with it. And using it as a platform to have community in a world where even though we're more connected than ever, people have never felt so alone. So we need more people like you to show
Absolutely.
up.
Absolutely. And to your point about comparison and did I just make myself sad? And maybe it's sad, frustrated, maybe it's I gotta imagine on LinkedIn in particular, like when we're talking about people professionally showing up, people feel like I haven't done enough.
Yeah.
I'm not enough. And it's like, yeah, people probably use Gemini or ChatGPT to help them write this. They probably click the little rewrite button too. And you are only seeing part of people's journeys. And for me personally, I wanted to have an honest conversation where
Yes.
people felt seen and heard and understood.
Yes.
Because you look online, it's like, how did this person go from a beginning product manager to a VP? I'm
Yeah.
not enough. I didn't do the right career jumps. And it's like, no, they had all the titles in between. You just don't have to put that on the resume if you're still at the same company. Like all of it is marketing sometimes. And so
Yeah.
not attaching your self-worth to
Yes.
what you're seeing other people doing. And I love with, what when you're saying serving, how it resonates for me is I've been so fortunate to have conversations with wonderful mentors and the amount of one-on-ones that I have because of the size of my team, I'm saying the same things over and over and over again. And maybe it's back to that heart value. Like just tell, they just pour out. This is where I'm struggling. This is where I'm frustrated. And it's like, it's really important for other people to see that. So I became less afraid of showing up on social media
Mhm.
when it felt like I'm trying to help you. I'm not here to put that pressure on myself that I am a subject matter expert. And in some areas I am, and in other areas like everybody else it's like I'm growing and learning and there are future people that will work in my business and on my team that will be watching
Yeah.
what I'm doing on LinkedIn long before they come into my business. I join their board, I go advising for them, and I want them to know that I see them as people also. So I thought it was a gift of serving them where they are now, that they're not alone. But it's also, I think, a recruiting tool for people to
100%.
see what kind of leader are you.
Yep.
So can you talk about for the leaders of companies that you work with and not their business brand, but their personal brand, what advice do you give them?
One of the biggest challenges of growing a business is attracting and retaining talent.
Mhm.
And I have found that social media solves that problem.
Say more.
And it's the place where you can go to really show your business's mission, vision, values, your culture, and attract in the exact type of people that you want working inside your business. But the only way to find those people is to be consistent and show up and tell your story and show the day in and the day out. Show the big picture vision, but also show like micro what's actually happening behind the scenes inside
Mhm.
the business day to day. I have credited social media. I mean, I could tell you at least 20 different stories of how I found people. And actually, honestly, it's the reverse. People find us through social media. It is so powerful. And it's one of my biggest business growth tips that I can offer outside of just building a really strong culture, because we all know for a company to grow, it starts with your team and just really having good people and then having people that are aligned in the values that you have, and they also have the right skill set. You can't grow a business without a team. But also, yeah, social media is 100% a huge tool you can use to attract in the talent that you need to grow your business.
Yeah. And so would you say that maybe a call to action for people that have teams, whether it's a small team or they actually own the business is, for every one time that they put that LinkedIn thing that says, I'm hiring and throw out a job post, that
Yeah.
how much more should they be posting about not just their product and service? Yes, there's that, but what they value in the team, showing values in action. Can you kind of give them a ratio of, all right, I post job postings out there on LinkedIn. How much more should they or could they be, or a starting point for ratio of job posts to actually content about your values, the business?
Yeah. It's a great question. Right now, and just is going to continue to go this direction, it's all about quality over quantity. So I recommend investing the amount of time that you have to put into that, creating the content, writing, putting a post together. As it's important that the content is intentional and that it's valuable. I think a 3-to-1 ratio would be perfect,
Hmm.
potentially 5-to-1. So every 3 posts, you have a job post, and 3 posts about the business, a job post. But you need to be consistent, because that is how employees are scouting companies and evaluating companies that they want to work for. Is they're going to look at your socials, they're going to look at your LinkedIn, they're going to look at which employees of yours work on LinkedIn, they're going to look at your Instagram, they might look at your Facebook, but they're going to want to see, what does this actually look like? And it's so much more than just having your nice website up to date, but it's really important to showcase that. And on LinkedIn specifically, I really love it when they do employee stories and highlights and talk about why they enjoy what they do, what they're most passionate about, what
Hmm.
got them started in the industry or in the business. It's also great to hear from leaders on the team, have them share a little bit of that. It's great to hear from customers. So you can pull in a lot of different people to tell that story, but it's definitely important to have a mix of content for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know the exact ratio, but my spidey senses tell me as I'm watching and feeling what is happening in the corporate space right now, if you are listening and you work for someone else and you are not the owner of the company, do an audit of what you've posted, what you're commenting on, and how much are you talking about that company versus your voice and your perspective. Because the world is changing so much, there is so much downsizing, restructuring, even if you are incredibly talented with a lot of experience out there. If you are not visible
Mhm.
beyond the company and you only have your brand and you're only posting for the company that you're associated with, you're going to feel lost and you're more vulnerable. And it's going to be harder to pivot if people don't know who you are outside of the logo you're attached to. And
Mhm.
so I actually see this as not a nice to have, or quite frankly, how you feel about
Yeah.
social media. I know I'm all about heart, but sometimes it's like, I kind of don't care how you feel about social media. The reality is, this is where people play. to find businesses networks. And I think it's actually more of an insurance policy for yourself and your career of who are you besides just being an employee with an employee number at
Right.
a particular company as well.
Right. I completely agree, and that's a really good point, and as an employee, I know before I started social practice, I used my personal social media as a way to market myself and
Mhm.
tell my story and share my perspective on things, and I think if depending on what position you're in or depending on what company you're in, I think it's always safe to have a conversation with the leaders on your company and just get clear on what are the boundaries, what is appropriate. A lot of companies are aware that employees are using social media to share. It's not a taboo topic, and in fact, if your employer makes it one, I have my own opinions on that because that makes it hard for you to be able to grow and evolve into
Mhm.
what you've been called to be. But I think something as simple as a conversation, if you're concerned about if that's one of the things that's holding you back, and that's a
Yeah.
very valid concern of like, well, what if my boss sees it, or what if one of my coworkers sees it, what if one of my employees sees it, and they're going to wonder what's this person doing? That's where communication is so important. So have the conversation
Mhm.
and then start sharing. But don't let that fear of what are they going to think or how is it going to make them feel, don't let that hold you back.
Yeah. And social media can be a way to provide a snippet, but it doesn't need to be where all your thoughts and feelings are. You
Yeah.
can put stuff on Substack, you can put things behind paywalls. You don't have to pour everything out publicly and give it away for free either. So for our listener today, can be male or female, right? That is not specific. They are someone that's been in their career 10, 15, 20, 20 plus years. They are not brand new. They've done something in their career and they're hearing this conversation today and they're like, okay, Mary, okay, Monique, I hear you. I need to start posting somewhere.
Mhm.
I'm reluctant. I don't like this, but I feel like I have something that I could offer other people, but I'm not clear about my purpose, my values. I don't know if I want to launch a business, but I do think I have some stuff to share that could be helpful. To that listener, what tangible things could you recommend to help them get started? And maybe some things that they could do, and maybe like a mindset that they may need to explore.
Yeah. So I think there's two tangible things to think about before jumping in. The first is, what are you currently a subject matter expert in? What are you constantly finding yourself coaching people on, educating people on? What do the people in your life ask you about? What are you being asked advice on? That's your topic. That's your starting point. And then think about, who am I speaking to? Who am I wanting to share my message with? I know one place that sometimes we get stuck is, well, I've got my friends from high school and college that follow me. I have former clients, I have my family, I have employees, I have current clients. That's a lot of different people, right? And
Mhm.
so when you decide what is the most common thing and like your subject matter, think about, okay, which audience are you trying to serve? I know that's a huge block for a lot of people, is the fear of showing up and sharing. And my friend from high school is going to think this is silly because it's just so unrelated to their life. I'm going to come on here and I'm going to talk about leadership. But, Sarah, who I went to high school with, she's a stay at home mom. She doesn't care about leadership. Sarah's not your audience. Sarah's
Mhm.
friend, which you guys can stay friends on social media, but we have to really reframe it as not being afraid of what everyone's going to think, but really taking it as an honor and privilege to be called forward to pour into the people that you're being called to pour into, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's, we just attended the personal branding retreat with Emily Ford, and she's got a wonderful program called Fortify My Brands that I'm currently walking through. So if you need branding support, I highly recommend exploring her business. One of her messages is that it's selfish to keep information to yourself. So if you know all of these things and you're seeing things and you're passionate and you're not sharing it with anybody, it's honestly selfish. I actually had a conversation about this on Friday. I spoke at an aesthetics workshop, and our keynote speaker has been very successful in business. He sold his company for over $100 million. And we asked him, why do you still speak at these things? You could be off on your private island, living your best life, saying, hasta la vista, y'all have a great day. I don't ever want to do anything ever again, right? He could easily just say, I'm done. I've done my work. And he said one of his mentors at a Fortune 500 company, he said, it is your duty, it is your responsibility as a leader and as someone who has found success to pass that down and to pour into others with that knowledge. And so that's really helped me, at least, with mindset is, some days you have a bad day. You've got employees that you're struggling with. You've got clients you're struggling with. You've got personal, family, friend struggles. Everyone's got their eyes on you because it's on social media. So you think, you know what, I can't show up today because I've got XYZ going on. If you start letting that be the story, you're never going to show up because every
Mhm.
single day there's something going on. So that's one place to start, is really get clear on what are you currently a subject matter expert in, and
Mhm.
who are you speaking to, and then just going for it. I say let it rip. And some things are gonna do great, and other things aren't. And you're gonna learn from it. And it's you're not shooting a Super Bowl commercial. The great thing about social is you can put things out there, and then if you don't love it, you could always take it down.
Mhm.
That's my philosophy around that.
Yeah. I think you really touch on that it doesn't have to be perfection. And I think now more than ever, people are craving authenticity and people who are real. And that makes you relatable, and that's important. I also think, and I don't know, let me know what you think of this. I think for many people, if you're using social media either to build a business or to get another job or do advising work or just expand your network, that it is also the opportunity to give your voice and better share your story than your resume can. Because we often feel so limited by our resume and what you can fill in there. And you look at it and you read it, sometimes you're like, well, that doesn't represent all that I am. And so thinking of it as a way to share the other aspects of you so people can better know you and understand what you have to offer. And sometimes it's sharing the struggles that you've been through before helps people see, oh, they could bring that to this role or to this job. And I understand their thought process and their mental models, or man, I like them. I'd wanna hang out with them. I'd wanna go skiing with them. I'd wanna go hiking with them. There's that old adage of people do business with who they know, like, and trust, and now this is the new forum for that.
That's exactly the word that came to mind. And you hit I love the word authenticity. It is a little bit overused in the social media space. Energy, you can't fake energy, and you can't
Mhm,
there's only so much that you can do to show up a certain way. People connect with others on social who are very comfortable with being authentic and vulnerable to themselves. And there's no way around it. And I
mhm,
know it's a little awkward at first, especially if you're not used to doing that. I have been doing this for over 10 years. I used to have a blog. I used to be an influencer. I've done all the things, and now I'm more in the business world. But I still, every day, I'm like, well, this is a little awkward. I'm sitting here filming myself. Like, if anyone were to sit and watch me do this, they'd be like, this girl's, but it's like, I do it anyways because I know like this is
mhm.
part of what I'm being called to do. And I just like to call it, I just get over myself and I just do it anyways.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for how you show up in the world. Thank you for finding that balance of having social media helping people find their purpose and vision and, the very real side of mental health and protecting their minds and hearts as well. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much, and I know for a lot of people this might give them the courage to take that first step in putting themselves out there. Maybe they've known and that's just that little nudge. So if you've had that whisper, this is the sign. Here you go. Here's the episode. Get posting and make sure to tag us so we can see and cheer you on. So,
Yes.
where can people find you on social media if they want to learn more about your agency and follow you personally?
Yes, and I say just to echo what you said, it's never too late to get started. I don't care what season of life you're in, what season of business you're in. It's never too late to lean into a bigger purpose that you might not fully have clarity on, but just get started and lean on community and follow Monique and myself. I am a huge cheerleader on social media. I've got so many friends on there who are doing similar things that I am. So don't be afraid to reach out. But you can find me on my personal is Mary Elizabeth Robb, and my business is Social Practice US. I'm mostly on Instagram, but you can find me on LinkedIn too. And I'd love to connect with you guys. And Monique, thank you so much for creating this podcast and just for creating space to share stories with your guests and connect with others. This is such a gift of time. And I'm so grateful that we got to meet.
Oh, thank you. I am too. Thank you for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. Okay, friends, I will make sure everything is in the show notes. Please take one action, experiment with it, see what works for you, leave what doesn't. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you take care of yourselves. Talk soon. Thank you for tuning into this episode today. And remember, friends, there is no one right way to do this thing called life. I hope you found this conversation valuable. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you may listen. And it would mean the world to me if you went and you clicked on rate the show and left a 5-star rating to help other people find these conversations. Until then, friends, keep experimenting. Talk to you soon.